The silent seat space hummed like a throat trying not to scream. The interstellar diplomatic shuttle, Vigilant Mercy, floated between the black folds of space like a silver tear. On board, 75 delegates from 12 different species moved, with stiff smiles and careful words, as if diplomacy were a glass they all carried across a floor made of knives. No one shouted. No one argued. Not here. Not in the central spine of the galaxy's most fragile piece. And yet something felt wrong. Something moved beneath the surface of the shuttle. Not in the walls, not in the engines, but in the air itself, like a breath waiting to exhale. It began with a request. A tall delegate, wrapped in layers of shifting scales and glistening threads, rose from their seat during the third cycle of diplomatic introductions. They spoke in a voice like metal being bent slowly. "Remove the human," they said. "They are a threat to all life aboard." The room did not gasp. That would be undiplomatic. Instead, silence flowed like cold water. Eyes, some wide and wet, some made of lenses, some hidden beneath skin, turned to the end of the table. The human sat there, alone, quiet, not part of any alliance, not introduced with grand speeches, just present, like a shadow you only notice once it moves. No one knew their name. The human looked up, not afraid, not confused, only waiting. The ship's interior lights dimmed slightly, as if reacting to the tension, or perhaps to something deeper, something listening. "On what grounds?" asked Ambassador Cray of the Veilborn, blinking their feathered crests with precision. The scaled delegate, Ambassador Jashrek of the Cairn, unfolded a data strip. It glowed with unreadable glyphs. They did not show it to the others. They didn't need to. They are a Class 7 singularity species, unfit for collective engagement, unpredictable, capable of systemic decay within stable ecosystems. Ambassador Cray tilted their head. That classification was revoked 2 cycles ago. Revoked by politics, not by truth, Jashrek hissed. And then, without raising their voice, they added something strange. Something that made the temperature in the chamber drop. The stars remember what humans are. The old systems remember. Even if you have all forgotten. A low murmur started. Whispers in languages made of scent, pulse, flickers of ultraviolet. The human said nothing. Not even when Ambassador Jashrek turned to them fully. "You must leave, or I will invoke species defense protocol." Everyone froze. That protocol had not been used in over 600 cycles. It permitted the execution of any delegate deemed an existential threat. It had never failed to escalate into bloodshed, into war, and now it balanced on a single breath. The human's breath. They stood, slowly, hands at their sides, eyes scanning, no one. Lips slightly parted as if listening to a whisper only they could hear. "I don't want violence," they said. The words were soft, plain, spoken in basic speech, understood by all present. "Then leave," Ambassador Jashrek demanded. "No." Though denial did not echo, but it pressed against the walls like fog. Ambassador Jashrek's hands twitched. Their guards moved, scales clicking. The room bristled. Ambassador Cray intervened quickly. "We should deliberate. Consider all—" "You don't understand," Jashrek snarled. "This is not politics. This is survival. We have records, legends, warnings carved into the cores of dead stars. Every system the humans touched fell to ruin. They bring shadows with them. They carry something." Their voice wavered. "What?" asked someone. Ambassador Jashrek looked at the human. Not with anger, not even hate, but fear. "They carry what sleeps between galaxies." At that moment, the shuttle's artificial gravity flickered, only for a breath. But it was enough. Panic rippled through the minds of those sensitive to gravitational shifts, not because of the flicker, but because it hadn't come from a mechanical fault. It had come from outside. Ambassador Cray's eyes widened. "There's nothing near us. No masses large enough to cause that." unless something just woke. Up, whispered a delegate from the crystalline hive clans, and still the human stood, unmoving, unblinking. You knew this would happen, Jashrek said. You brought it here. The human shook their head. I am it. A scream tried to form in someone's throat. It never reached the air, because just then, the lights went out, not all at once. That would have been kinder. No, first, the light faded from the data strips, then from the wall panels, then from the table's edge. Like the dark was eating the light piece by piece. In the half-glow, everyone turned toward the human. They were gone, but not absent, not missing. They were around. A breath passed through the room. It smelled like frost, like ozone, like the moment before lightning. Emergency protocols, someone whispered. We are already in one, Cray said, voice hollow. Then, from somewhere deep in the shuttle's belly, a sound began, a low thrumming pulse, like a heartbeat made of stone. The shadow that speaks it began with a whisper, not a sound, not a voice, a feeling sliding under the skin between thought and memory. The lights did not return. The heartbeat of stone kept pulsing from the lower decks, steady, slow, impossibly deep, like it came from the bones of the universe. The delegates clung to their protocols, their ranks, their illusions of control. Some activated emergency lights. Others spoke into comms that no longer responded. A few drew weapons, each powered by alien science and authority. None of it mattered, because the dark was no longer just dark. It was watching. Ambassador Kree moved with trembling feathers. Their people were attuned to emotion like others to gravity. They could feel it now, the fear eating through the room, like a silent tide. Split into groups, Kree whispered. Do not leave anyone alone. They were too late. One of the aides was already missing. They had been standing near the wall. Now only their cloak remained, slowly unraveling into strands of frozen dust. Ambassador Jashrek knelt beside it, touched the fabric. When they looked up, something in their face had broken. It's starting, they said. Just like the archives warned. Just like the silence wars. Cray stepped forward. Tell me what you know. Jashrek's eyes glistened, their voice barely more than breath. There was no war. Not really. Only disappearance. Stars went dark. Entire fleets turned to salt. Stations found with no crew, only shadows on the walls. And in the center of it all, every time a human. One. Always alone. Always forgotten in the reports. Always. The last scene. They looked around at the trembling delegates, and every time they came, something followed. Or perhaps was inside them all along. Beneath their feet, the shuttle groaned. Not from pressure, not from damage, from weight. Something was moving in the lower decks. We need to find the human, Cray said. But they were wrong. The human was already finding them. The corridors of the vigilant mercy stretched in every direction, glowing dimly with reserve power. The walls were made of alloy and living fiber, a blend of 12 species. Technologies meant to be indestructible. But they were changing. The walls were growing thin. Not physically, visually. The metal shimmered, sometimes showing glimpses of things behind them. Shapes not made for light, vast and coiling and whispering in languages no one remembered. The delegates moved in clusters. They passed a viewing panel where stars once burned bright. Now there was nothing. No stars, no light. Only a void that pulsed as if breathing. One of the younger delegates, a Lyran child barely past hatching, turned to the others. The dark is hungry, they said. What do you mean? Kree asked gently. The child stared at the window. It's waiting for her to die. Somewhere deeper in the ship, a door opened. It did not swing. It peeled. Like skin. The human stepped through. But they were different now. Their eyes glowed softly, like moons underwater. Their steps made no sound. They walked without disturbing the air, and around them the ship softened. Walls curled. Lights dimmed further. Machinery stilled. The humans stopped at a mirror. Their face did not reflect. Instead, the mirror showed stars dying. "You're waking up," they said to it. The mirror rippled, then whispered back, "We are already awake." Back in the council chamber, the delegates argued in hushed panic. "What is it?" someone demanded. "A weapon? A parasite?" "No," Jashrik said, staring into the dark. "It's a memory." Cray turned. "What do you mean?" "It's not in her. It is her. Or she is it. Or they're the same. I don't know. But the galaxy once knew this horror. And then we forgot. They swallowed hard. And now she's remembering it for us." The human reached the engine core. It was quiet. It was listening. The ship's heart, built to bend space and time, was whispering in a language only she understood. Not because it was ancient, because it was hers. A voice from nowhere spoke. "Why, now?" she answered without lips moving. "Because they never stopped. They still judge. They still fear us. They never truly accepted." "And you?" the voice asked. "Do you still love them?" Her face flickered. "I don't know." On the upper deck, the delegates reached a terrible consensus. "We must jettison the human," Jashrik declared. "Now. Or we all die." "You don't understand," Cry whispered. "We are inside her now. The ship, the void, us. We're part of the remembering." Jashrik raised a weapon, and the lights returned, only for a moment, and in that moment, they saw the human standing at the far end of the corridor, but she was no longer fully flesh. She was folding in on herself, and out of herself, like paper bending across dimensions, and behind her, eyes, endless eyes, not shaped like any life form, not bound by skin or skull or gravity, eyes like black stars. Eyes that watched not with curiosity, but with recognition. They had found her. They had come for her, and through her for everything else. Someone screamed, someone ran, someone fell, and then came the voice. It came from the walls, from the vents, from the deepest places of memory. It did not speak words. It showed them. Visions. A fleet of dead ships orbiting a star that no longer shined. A child floating in space, laughing while their eyes turned to ink. A planet made of screams, orbiting. Nothing, where time ran backward and forward at once, and in all of them. Her, not older, not younger. Always the same. Always the last one left. Ambassador Craig collapsed to their knees. "What is she?" they whispered. Jashrik answered, voice hollow. "She's not a weapon. Pause. She's the consequence." The lights flickered again, and she stepped forward, only a few feet. But it felt like the ship groaned under it. "You want to know what I am?" she said. "I was made to end things." Her voice did not echo, because the walls were no longer walls. They were ears. Your peace, your alliances, your stars, all built on forgetting, on lies. You erased what you feared, but fear remembers. Her eyes flared brighter. And now I remember too. The ground split, not from explosion but from regret. The ship cracked like a truth being spoken, and from below came light. No, not light. Something that wore light as a mask. It rose slowly, tendrils of history and ruin. The shape of vengeance without violence. The thing that watches from behind every failed promise. The thing she became, and it whispered one word. A word no translation system could carry. A word that made everyone scream. Because it was their name and their ending. And the stars turned away. The name had no letters. It was not spoken, only felt. Like frost crawling up the spine, like being watched by something too large to understand. Those who heard it could no longer remember their own names. They began to forget simple things. Where they stood. What species they were. How many limbs they had. Time warped, not violently, but like a gentle current slowly pulling everything away. The delegates did not realize they were drifting, not through space, through her. Cree clung to their last memory. It was soft, their siblings' laughter on a coral moon. It echoed in their mind, but now it sounded farther away, thinner. The laughter was drowning in silence. Cree looked around. They were still in the ship, or maybe a copy of it. The walls looked the same, but the light was wrong. It had no source. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Shadows fell upward. Gravity pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the floor, and something else. There were no doors, only openings, soft-edged, pulsing, like wounds. "Hello?" Cree called. The ship answered, not with words, with memories that were not theirs. A desert world, 2 suns bleeding across the sand. A child walking alone, barefoot, dragging something that whispered in a forgotten language. A great machine, orbiting a gas giant, tearing itself apart in slow, mechanical suicide, while a single figure watched, through a cracked visor, a council room. This council room, filled with bodies, none breathing, and on the table, a mirror. In the mirror, her, always her, smiling. "This isn't real," Cree whispered. But it was. It was more real than the ship, the peace, the galaxy. This was the truth underneath everything. She had peeled it open, and now they were inside it. Ambassador Jashrek was alone. They had tried to shoot her, tried to activate the self-destruct. Nothing worked. The gun had melted, not with heat, but with shame. The weapon realized it had no purpose here. Jashrek wandered the halls. They changed behind them. Each corridor led back to her. Sometimes she stood still, sometimes walking, sometimes crawling on the ceiling, speaking to something they couldn't see. Each time she looked more distant, more ancient. Her skin didn't age, but her presence did. It grew heavier. The longer you looked, the more you remembered things you never lived. Jashrek saw a star being born inside a scream. They saw themselves. No, something wearing their face. Kneeling before a throne of teeth, begging for death, and above it, her, not judging, just watching. They fell to their knees. "Why?" Jashrek begged. "What are you trying to do?" And she appeared behind them, not with sound, not with movement, just suddenly there. "I didn't want this," she said. "Then stop," Jashrek cried. She knelt beside them. "I can't." And she looked into their eyes. "You woke me up." In another part of the ship, 2 delegates held hands. One was made of gas and light held in a shimmering field. The other was a quadruped, all muscle and song. They whispered old lullabies from their homeworlds, tried to pretend they were somewhere else. They heard the whisper again, the wordless name. They forgot. The lullaby halfway through, forgot their hands, forgot who they were. Only the fear remained, not terror, not panic. Reverence. They began to pray, but not to their gods, to her. The ship drifted, not in space, in unspace, a place without stars, without direction, without meaning. Somewhere, the engine still pulsed, but it was no longer fuel that moved them. It was memory, hers, and she walked the ship now not as a passenger, not as a diplomat, but as a storm. Cree found her again, in the garden deck, or what used to be the garden deck. Now it was filled with trees that bled light, roots that hummed in sorrow, fruit that screamed when touched. She sat in the middle, surrounded by floating orbs of ice. Each one held a memory, not from the crew, not from the ship, from others. Ships long dead, species erased, songs that no longer had a tongue to sing them. "What is this?" Cree asked. "A graveyard," she said. "You keep them?" "I remember them." "Why?" She looked up. "Because no one else does." They sat in silence. Cree wanted to run, scream, cry. Instead, they asked something worse. "Are we next?" She did not answer with words. She held out her hand, and Cree saw a future, a war, No sides, only fire, only silence, only her, walking across the ashes of 1,000 worlds. A whisper behind her, begging for peace. A voice in her mind, crying for love. And her eyes wet with regret, but her hands kept burning because it was too late. Cray recoiled. "You're not here to destroy us," they said. "You already have." She nodded. "This is not invasion," she said. "This is aftermath." Jashrek was climbing now. Not the halls, not stairs, just climbing. The ship turned vertical, but there was no gravity. Only the urge to go up. Above was something, a door maybe, an ending. At the top she waited, smiling, holding out a mirror. "Look," she said. He did, and saw not himself, but the first time he called a human lesser, the first time he lied to win a treaty, the first time he buried truth beneath a flag, and then, the last thing he would ever see, her face, before he fell. But he never hit the ground, he just was no longer needed. In the central chamber, she stood now, alone again. The ship was empty, not dead, just done. The delegates were not gone. They were remembered, placed inside her, held tight, not with cruelty, with care. And then a voice, small, shaking, from the last surviving soul. A young technician, barely old enough to understand diplomacy. "Why are you doing this?" She turned, and this time she looked tired. So tired. "Because I loved them." She walked toward the viewport, space-weighted, but not stars. A wall of black, alive, eager. And because they never learned to love back. And then she opened herself. Not her body, her truth, and the stars, for the first time in history, turned away. Her silence is not mercy space cracked, not open, not apart. It cracked inward. The vigilant mercy no longer drifted. It hung, suspended in a place without direction, surrounded by something that did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. It only watched. Inside, the survivors whispered to themselves, not out of fear of being heard, but fear of being understood. Because if she heard them, she might remember them. And remembering now was death. Ambassador Cray counted their breaths. 139. Then again. 127. Then, again 94. "My memory is bleeding," they whispered. "My time is bending." The walls pulsed, not with light, with history. Every second stretched, every breath cracked like glass. And somewhere in the ship, the human was quiet, which was worse than when she spoke, because her silence was not peace. Her silence was waiting. There were still 5 left, 5 conscious minds, not alive, not sane, just present. A technician who no longer remembered their own name. An engineer who whispered code into the floor, hoping it would listen. A priest of the void star faith, shaking with doubt, eyes stitched shut to keep from seeing. Ambassador, Cray and her, the last human. She was no longer searching, she was remembering. And as she remembered, reality itself tore. They found her near the cryopods. They had never seen her cry. But now she sat with her back to the wall, knees drawn to her chest, silent, trembling. Around her the floor had collapsed, not physically but conceptually. It no longer knew it was a floor. It had become a feeling. Regret. Cold and endless. Cray stepped carefully. "You're hurting," they said. She nodded. "I didn't want to wake up," she whispered. "I didn't want to become this again." The priest stepped forward. Their mouth opened, stitched shut with force of will, but the stitches undid themselves, not with hands, not with scissors, with memory. They spoke. A prayer, not to her, but through her. "She is not the wound," the priest whispered. "She is the scar that never fades." The human looked up. Her eyes were black holes. "No," she said. "I am the hand that tried to heal it, and failed." The technician opened a panel. Inside was a message. Not written, carved, not by a blade, by time. Do not let her reach the core. The message pulsed once, then vanished. The technician screamed, "She's going to rewrite everything." The engineer laughed. Not from humor, from collapse. It's already rewritten. We are the footnote. She is the ink. The ship shuddered. Space folded outside, not from mass, from meaning. Stars appeared, then reversed, then died, then were never born. The ship moved through them, not through space, but through story. She was erasing the versions of the galaxy that had forgotten, rewriting them with remembrance. Whole civilizations blinked in and out. Species that had never existed screamed their first and last breath in a single instant, and still, she sat, silent, crying. Cree knelt before her. "You're doing this because you're hurt." She nodded. "Then stop." "I can't." "Why?" She opened her palm. Inside it, a seed. Black. Turning. Alive. "Because they planted this in me." "Who?" "Everyone who called us animals. Everyone who used us. Everyone who feared us. Every broken treaty. Every broken bone. Every broken child. All of it grew into this." She closed her hand and the ship screamed. The engineer died next, not by force, by loop. They stepped into a corridor and never stopped. They kept walking and walking and walking until they vanished into their own footsteps. Gone. The hallway closed, behind them like a forgotten door. The technician begged for escape. The ship answered, with a window. Just one. But what lay beyond was not space. It was her childhood. Played on loop. A little girl in a cold shelter, holding her brother's hand, watching soldiers paint over her future, and behind her, shadows. Learning. Growing. "They made me," she whispered. "But they didn't make me like this." The priest tried to bless her, tried to cleanse, tried to forgive. But forgiveness shattered like glass on stone. She touched his forehead, gently, and said, "You believe in God?" "Yes." "Then go meet him." His body didn't fall. It simply emptied. His soul, a spiral of light, rushed outward, but not into heaven, into her. She consumed belief like air and wept again. "He was beautiful," she said. "I didn't want to do that." And now there were two. Cry. And her. They stood at the core, the last place in the ship untouched. The engine pulsed, alive, singing a song no one wrote, a song of endings. She stood before it, held the seed in one hand. Cry stepped forward. "Don't," they said, "please. If there's anything left of you, of the human, don't plant it." She turned. Her eyes weren't empty anymore. They were full of stars, of ghosts, of love. "I don't want to," she said. "Then don't." She opened her palm. The seed pulsed. "But if I don't, they'll forget again." "And if you do?" Her tears glowed. "Then the galaxy ends." A silence fell. And then, from behind her, a voice. Soft. From the dark, a child. Not dead. Not gone. Just late. "You don't have to fight anymore," the child said. She turned. "Brother?" He nodded. She dropped the seed. It sank into the floor, but did not grow. Instead, it cracked, and inside it, a second version of her. Smaller, fragile, innocent. "That's who I was," she said before, and Cray whispered, "Then become her again." The ship collapsed, but not into fire, into peace, into memory, into a soft, echoing hum. And she, the storm, the wound, the end, closed her eyes and whispered, "For now." The ones who remembered her wrong, there were no alarms anymore, no lights, no walls, no corridors, only impressions of them. As if the ship had become a dream, someone forgot halfway through. Ambassador Cray drifted inside that dream. They no longer walked. They were carried by thought, by fear, by something larger than gravity. They didn't know if they were alive or simply too stubborn to dissolve, but they remembered, and that meant something. She stood in the heart of the ship now, not the engine core, not the control deck. The heart. It wasn't a place designed by builders. It had grown out of her, grown out of grief. It pulsed like a lung. It breathed memory. And around her the walls bled echoes, the echoes of species screaming her name in fear. She didn't smile anymore. She just watched, as if waiting for the final moment when someone would make her choose. But no one had the right words. Not yet. Something ancient stirred in the dark between stars. Not a god, not a being. A record, written into the shape of the cosmos, encrypted in time, hidden beneath the surface of existence, and now it opened. Because she was remembering, and when she remembered, the galaxy did too. Cry floated before her. They had no weapon, no words, only a question. What happens if you finish this? She didn't blink. Then no one will forget. Cry swallowed. But nothing will survive. She nodded. That's the price. And if we remember, if we change? Her eyes shimmered. You've said that before. A shadow flickered nearby. Not hers. Not trees. Another, the technician, or what was left of them. They had wandered too close to the seed of her past self. It had grown, fed by guilt, watered with fear. Now the technician was becoming, not her, but a reflection of her, a malformed echo, a warning. Their voice broke in static and song. I saw it, saw the truth, saw the chains. You are not the monster. You are the mirror. The human turned soft grief in her voice. I never wanted anyone to carry this. The technician reached for her and disintegrated, not into dust, into data, a glowing thread of what they used to be, absorbed by the walls. She wept again. The walls wept with her. The stars outside were not stars anymore. They were eyes. Some cried, some watched, some closed. And when one closed, a planet somewhere vanished. Because seeing her kept things real, and not seeing her meant the end. Cry felt this in their bones. We're all just keeping her alive, they said. No, she whispered. You're all keeping yourselves alive by pretending I'm not. And then the gods returned, not to help, not to stop her, but to ask. From the far edge of known space, from temples made of time, from voids where prayer had once mattered, they came, gods of thought, gods of gravity, gods of vengeance and mercy. They took no shape. They took her shape. Each one a version of her, taller, colder, older, each one a possibility that never happened, and they all said, come back to us. She stared at them. I left you for a reason, they replied as one. We made you. She stepped forward. Then unmake me. Cree could barely speak. What are they? The source, she said. Source of what? Of me. Pause. Of the reason you fear humans. Of the truth behind the stories. The things we touched, and the things that touched us back. The gods spoke again. You were meant to sleep. Forever. She held out her hand. The seed of her memory pulsed between her fingers. Then you shouldn't have left the door open. The gods reached for her, and she changed. Not into something new, into everything she had ever been. A child. A soldier. A whisper in a cryo chamber. A scream on a battlefield. A peacekeeper. A war crime. A mother who lost her child to policy. A diplomat whose words were swallowed by silence, and a weapon, an old weapon, built not to destroy the enemy, but to remember them so deeply they could never rise again. The gods hesitated, because now they remembered why they sealed her, not because she was evil, not because she was cruel, but because she loved, too deeply, too violently, too truthfully. She would not let the galaxy forget what it had done, and that kind of memory could burn whole civilizations. One god dared to touch her. Their form, shifting, blinding, infinite, collapsed, into her arms, into remorse. The others fell back. She turned to Trey. They're not gods, just regrets. And her eyes, they softened, for the first time since the ship fell silent. Do you regret me? Cree did not answer, because regret would mean she had no right to ask for forgiveness. Outside the ship, the galaxy froze. Systems paused, clocks failed, dreams stopped mid-sentence. Everything waited, because her decision was coming, and she would not make it alone. She turned to the last survivors, those still clinging to names. I am not your punishment, she said. I am your reflection. She held out the seed. Take it, she said. Carry it forward. Remember us the right way. No one moved. No one dared, except Cree. They reached out and took it. It pulsed once, twice, then dissolved into them, and Cree remembered all of it. Every colony burned, every treaty broken, every lie sold as peace, every time she begged to be heard and wasn't. And Cree screamed, not in pain, in understanding. And the ship sighed, not collapsing, not ending, resting. For now. She stepped away from the heart, toward the stars. They watched her. She watched back and whispered, soft as grief, remember me better this time, and walked into the dark. The memory that eats silence. There was a time before her, before humans were feared, before the stars whispered warnings, before the galaxy carved a name into its bones and then buried it beneath centuries of false peace. But that time was over now, because she had returned, and the silence no longer held. The ship, vigilant mercy, no longer existed in form, not wrecked, not destroyed, transcended. It floated in a sea of stillness where gravity had no pull and time had no meaning. The shape of the ship pulsed softly like a heartbeat. It was no longer metal and wire. It was story. It was truth. And inside it, Ambassador, Cree stood alone, or maybe not alone, not anymore. Cree had seen everything, felt everything. The seed she had given them had rooted deep, not in flesh, in memory, and from it, knowledge grew, painful, brilliant, unbearable. They knew now what she was, not a weapon, not a monster, not even a god. She was the witness, the last voice in a galaxy that forgot how to listen, the only one who had carried the screams of the broken, the betrayed, the erased, and now that voice had gone quiet again, because she had stepped into the dark and taken the burden with her. But the memory, it had stayed behind, inside Tree, inside the ship, inside everything. Across the galaxy, the stars began to flicker, not dim, not die. They flickered like eyelids, like they were waking up, like they were remembering what they had seen and what they had allowed. The old species stirred. The hidden system shook. Monuments long abandoned began to bleed light. The ones who called themselves the architects of peace looked up into their false heavens and felt watched because she had left a part of herself in every system, not to destroy, to remind. On a moon in the dead spiral, a prophet woke screaming. On a station orbiting a black sun, a choir sang a song no one had written. And on a world where humans were still feared, a child opened her eyes for the first time, and they were hers. The ripple had begun, not of destruction, of reckoning, and yet Cree stood in silence. The ship around them breathed, soft, tired, full. She gave me a choice, Cree said. No one answered, only the hum of memory. Cray turned to the last terminal. Its screen glowed softly. A message pulsed. Do you want to forget? Cray stared at it. The simplest mercy. The chance to let go. To move on. To seal it all behind. Another wall of silence. Like before. Like always. Their hand hovered over the panel. And then dropped. No, they said. We remember this time. And the ship heard. And the ship wept. Not in sound. In release. Far beyond the edge of known space, she walked. Her feet touched nothing. Her form shimmered between what she had been and what she might become. The void around her pulsed with old names, lost histories, unfinished stories. She walked on, not alone. Behind her, shadows followed. Not enemies, not prisoners. Souls. The forgotten. They had followed her through death, through silence, through everything the galaxy had tried to erase. And she led them now, not to war, not to vengeance, to something new. The void parted, not like a curtain, like a wound healing. And ahead of her, a light pulsed, faint, distant, alive. A new galaxy, uncharted, unspoiled. She stood at its edge and paused. This time, she whispered, they'll hear us, and stepped through. Behind her, the wound closed, the past sealed, but not forgotten. Never again. Because now there were voices across the stars, soft at first, but growing, a whisper in every system. Do not forget her. Do not silence what you fear. Do not bury the broken, because next time she might not walk alone. And the stars, for the first time in recorded history, bowed, not in fear, in remorse. The end.